Jackie Estrada, and I have done a couple of books here that we are using as a launching point for having a kind of kamikaze grand opening festivity. Now, my background is that I've been to every single San Diego Comic-Con, starting with the first one in 1970. So I've been to all of them. I worked as a volunteer for Comic-Con starting in '74. I did things like editing the souvenir book, running the Artist's Alley, running the, starting with the blood drive, doing autograph signing, anything that was needed I did. But since 1990 I've been the administrator of the Will Eisner Comic Industry Awards, which are like the Oscars of comics. So in about 1974 I started taking pictures at Comic-Con, and then I got more into my photography later in the 70s and had my dark room and really got serious about photography. So I went to Comic-Con with a new eye to take photos that were not just snapshots, but photographs that would be worthy of being in a book eventually. So years and years and years went by, and I didn't do anything with these photos other than they were used in Comic-Con publications. You'll see them on the Comic-Con website. And there was a 40th anniversary book that Comic-Con put out in 2009 that I was the co-author of, and a lot of my photos are in this book. So about a year and a half ago, I was in a conversation with Lee Cozy here, and he was saying, do you know anybody who has photos of Comic-Cons, events like that? Because our company, Webble, is trying to do this kind of website that's going to be a host for all kinds of things related to comic conventions, videos, audio, photos, whatever it is. And I said, well, I have a lot of photos, but they're all over my house, and I have negatives, and I have prints, and I have this and that. And they said, well, we'll scan the negatives for you. Really?
I didn't know I was getting into it.
Not only would they scan them, but they would just scan them all high resolution and give me a hard drive with all the photos on it. So they did. So I had thousands of photos on this hard drive, and I said, now I have to do one because I have all these photos that I can share. So the first book came out a year ago, Comic Book People Photographs from the 1970s and 1980s. So these are photos mostly from San Diego Con, but the people in here are Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, the creators of Superman, Bob Kane, co-creator of Batman. You have Chuck Jones and Bob Clampett from animation. You have Robert Heinlein and Ray Bradbury from science fiction. All these people would come to Comic-Con in that era and just be mingling with each other and the fans. So you could just go up and start talking to Charles Schultz, for instance. So that book really has the historical stuff in it. It also has, when you get into the 1980s, young Frank Miller, young Neil Gaiman, a lot of the guys like Neil Adams and Jim Steranko and stuff like that who were doing stuff very popular in that time. Now this book came out a month ago, and these are photographs from 1990s. So when I was at the Chicago Comic Con in 1990, I met this guy here who was a cartoonist from Brooklyn, and we ended up getting married and starting a publishing company called Exhibit A Press to publish his comics, which feature Wolfenberg, Counselors of the Macabre, who have a law practice where their clients are all monsters and the supernaturally afflicted. So the comics were Wolfenberg, and then the title later was Supernatural Law. So we had this comic book company, so we started going to other conventions besides San Diego Con. So this book has photos that were taken at the Chicago Comic Con, at smaller press things like the Small Press Expo and APE, but also WonderCon. So I got more of a variety of people, especially getting into the self-publishing era. We have the Jeff Smiths and people like that, and full-blown Neil Gaiman and Frank Miller. In fact, the picture on the back is me with Frank Miller and Neil Gaiman. So these are the photos from that era, And the books mostly are black and white, but they each one have a color section. And those are some of the more colorful photos of people. There's a lot of reds and blues in the 90s. Red-headed people on there. That's Jill Thompson, for instance. And got Alex Ross. I'm looking at things upside down, so I'm trying to see who they are. Rob Liefeld, a dunk tank, doing funds in Chicago Comic-Con. So these are my books, and we have a few people here tonight whose photos are in one or both books. For instance, Eric Shanow over there, Age of Bronze, and Oz Books. It's in the first volume. Joe Phillips is in the second volume. Scott Dunber's in the second volume there. This guy here is about 10 pictures in the second volume. He kept jumping into the frame just as I was taking pictures.
I knew people the Silver Age.
And there are a few other people floating around. Will Lund back over there, he's in both books. His hair wasn't that color though. And then we also have tonight the Comic Fest people. Mike Towery is somebody who was on the very first San Diego Film Committee in 1970. So he and his lovely bride Wendy are involved in putting on Comic Fest, which is kind of harkening back to those early days in the 1970s. Comic-Con has that feel of intimate, everybody getting to hang out with each other and talk about comics, that type of event. So that's the basic background. So this is the point at which you ask me dozens of questions of things that I can elucidate.
Question, did you think at the time that it would ever get as big as it did, or was it just kind of something that grew?
There was no way we could have thought anything like that would happen. But one of the interesting things is if you go to a website called Comic-Con Memories, there are audio tapes of Shel Dorf's interviews with people at that very first 1970 con, including Ray Bradbury and Cory Ackerman and Jack Kirby. And Jack Kirby in that interview says, I can see a day when people come from all over the world to San Diego to celebrate not just comics, but all the things that, you know, movies and things like that all fans are interested in. So he was just way ahead of his time. He saw it. We didn't. But even in when we got to the mid-1970s, Star Wars, 1976, they did their first presentation of stuff at Comic-Con. The movie wasn't coming out until 77. And by then, we saw an increase in attendance at Comic-Con just from Star Wars fans, because Lucasfilm showed the movies. They brought, each time a new movie came out, they would bring all of the movies and show them. So that was always the most popular thing, in addition, of course, the comic stuff. But everybody says, it's not about comics anymore. Well, it's always been. The very first poster that was done, first flyer, had 3 things on it. It's comics, movies, science fiction. And those were the 3 areas that were the focus of the show. So it's still comics based, but it's still a whole amalgam and interaction. You know, that's the thing I've always appreciated about it, is that you will see, for instance, I have a photo in here. It's Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle, who are obviously science fiction authors, with Bob Clampett, famous Warner Brothers cartoonist, and Kirk Alyn, who was Superman in the serials. So, I mean, just seeing the combinations of people that would interact with each other. And a lot of projects came out of that era where, and still today, people run into each other and become introduced at Comic-Con, and the next thing you know, the next year they're announcing a project that they hatched because they met at Comic-Con. Bill, what's your question?
I don't know, we were having one, and I just had to come here with something I had to say. You know, talking about people complaining it's not comics anymore. It seems like every time I've ever talked to somebody, I said, well, what's the first thing you did when you walked in? Oh, I went to from the middle floor to one of the freebie giveaways that was happening. They didn't bother going over to the Golden Age area, the Silver Age area, the Small Press, anything like that. They gyrate towards the area where all the movie and all the free toys and all that stuff is, you know.
Whenever a
And I
fan,
always point out to them, here, on the map, here it is. You know, look at this. Here's the area that you say you want to see.
whenever
Bill
a
was on
fan,
the board of directors for 1 year.
Yeah, because when I was with registration, I was on the board. And then
I
this was my 17th show as vice president, which now I'm retired. Yay.
I was gonna say, whenever a fan complains it's not about comics anymore, I always say to them, so you're not gonna watch the Flash TV show or go to the next Avengers movie? I mean, this is what we always wanted, right?
I've always wanted a good Batman movie, you know, from when I was really young. Not, I never was a big Adam West fan. I looked so forward to Batman when it was advertising to come to TV, and I was really disappointed in what they put out. You know, yeah, sure, it's classic, and it's kind of neat now when I look back on it, but I was really disappointed. It wasn't the comic book. And that's what I always wanted. Something is going to be like the comic book. When Michael Keaton became Batman, I was like, oh my God, Michael Keaton? And that has been still my favorite one. It's the first Batman, Michael Keaton.
But of course, the reverse thing is now with all of the movies out, and somebody comes in this shop and says, Robert, I want a Supergirl comic. What do you tell them, you know?
Sorry?
If somebody comes in and says, I love the Supergirl TV show, where's the comic that goes with it?
There actually is one now.
They
So we go over to the essence.
But a lot of times, you know, people come in and they say, you know, I want an Avengers comic. Well, which Avengers, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Different eras.
Part of the reason the Claremont store looks the way it does. We try to carry everything that everybody could possibly want, regardless of how much space we have.
Do you have this book? Yes. Whether or not we can reach it.
This is what I noticed at the Claremont store. It's like, you want such and such? Okay, here's this pile. This one. Yes, I got it for you.
Unlike most other stores in San Diego, we will have it.
Any other questions about the olden days of Comic-Con, people I met and talked to? And the text in these is not just like, here's a picture of Forey Ackerman. Forey did this and this and this. Instead, it's anecdotes about my interaction and what they were like, and like for instance with Bob Kane, I just say, you know, don't ask about Bob Kane, things like that. So it's a very personal type stuff for me. But those who pick up the book here can get, you know, all these people to sign who are, you know, photos are in the book. I even have a list of what pages they're on in each book if you're interested. And I also have a special deal if you buy the two books. I have free wraparound cover for this one. I did a Kickstarter to do the book, and I had wraparound covers made, so I have a few extras of that for those who think that's it.
I have some funny stories about the process of scanning all that stuff too.
Oh, yeah, tell me.
When we first offered to scan it, we went and bought like $1,000 negative scanner, and it scanned the negatives at 78 megapixels. Like ridiculously high resolution, takes like 20 minutes per scan. And so we stuck in a few, and I think we got about through the first roll or two of I forgot what year it was. But we started going through them, and we realized the resolution was so high that at one point you'd actually taken your camera, and I think it was the U.S. Grand Hotel.
It was actually the El Cortez motel that you could see from the El Cortez Hotel, and I took pictures at night, and so there were some of the lights were on in some of the rooms, so you were able to peek in the room.
Suddenly we were like, there's naked people in these pictures. We found 40-year-old form. So we ended up down-resing the photos, and I think in the end we ended up turning in like 36 megapixel images instead. Because also at 20 minutes a scan, it was just, I had a small team, Patrick here, and also Gretchen who couldn't make it for the two primary scanners and everything, but it was a lot of fun. I was watching Gretchen's expression every time she saw Sergio Gomez.
People
Was it
love pictures.
Ryan? Oh yeah, because his mustache is it's just black, luxurious mustache right there.
Jack, why don't you just mention the times like El Cortez?
Well,
And
the-
those-
in the El Cortez day, that hotel was built so that there was a pool that people could just go out and relax around. And you'd go out there and it would, be Caliban, doing a drawing, sitting, talking to a science fiction author or something. There's all kinds of stories about people jumping into the pool from the second story. And also, we instituted an art auction that was a fundraiser to help keep putting the con on. And in the El Cortez years, the art auction, the art was created by people, the artists standing out by the pool, and they'd be doing paintings, and the kids would just, fans would be sitting around watching the paintings being done. And, the artists are wearing bathing suits, and I've got, so here's, speaking of Caliban, just drawing in his bathing suit out by the pool, and the fans looking on. And that's Leslie Kavarga drawing Betty Boop. So
My favorite picture in both books is actually the picture of Jack Kirby drawing the pig. He's got his pants hiked up, he's got a pipe, and he's just looks so cool.
Well, Jackie also told me that Alex Toad, since he didn't want to hang out in the hotel, he just sat by the pool. So if you wanted to talk to him, he'd be out there smoking. Imagine Alex Toad.
yeah, he was a smoker. So if there were rules, no smoking in the convention center, well, go to the hotel and hang out with him.
There's also a bunch of photos of, it was funny seeing the transition of eras, because there was a bunch of photos. I remember one sticks in my head the most. It was this very tall, lanky girl in like super Daisy Duke shorts, and she's actually wearing high heels. She's got one of her feet up on the table,
Yes.
and she's sitting there just smoking. And at the ground at her feet is just a pile of cigarettes, like just cigarette butts that she'd been sitting there chain smoking all day long. And there's just this pile of cigarettes. Do you have it in there?
No, but I was going to, one of the things, because that was done with rolls of film, so, I'd take half of the roll of film, and then go home and take pictures of my cat. So some of the pictures, oh, hey, what's this?
And you can tell when they started dating, because suddenly every third picture was.
But you also get to see individual people, change over time. So, for instance, my favorite is Bill Sienkiewicz, because in the first photo of him, he's got all kinds of hair, mustache, everything. Then the next year, he's got the hair but no mustache. Then suddenly he's blonde and has very little hair. And this was actually a wig at the time. He had, early male balding, and then, so he kind of looks at me like, why'd you have to put those pictures in a book, Jackie? But it just, for fans who went during that time, they would see that which Bill Sienkiewicz is it going to be this year? Any other questions?
Am I going to be in comic book 3?
I'm not currently planning a Comic Book People 3 for the simple reason that I stopped using a camera with film in about 2002. So from then on, it's been point shoot, and to me that's less, I don't have elaborate setup for photography like you can do digitally. I just, and plus with my responsibilities at Comic-Con, going between running the Eisner Awards and being in our booth, I've taken fewer photos in this century. And most of them are all at the Dead Dog Party on Sunday night after, oh wait, I haven't taken any pictures at this con yet. So I haven't taken the pictures
Catch
at the
everybody
last-
at their absolute
last
worst.
night. So it's kind of Bob Burden every year being drunk, so. But who knows, I might put together something at some point, you know, that has photos just for fun for that time, but I don't call them photography
I
the
just wonder,
way.
because the way it's got the years on it.
Yeah.
Oh, here comes the 2003.
Yeah, but who knows, maybe someday I'll do a, like, one volume that has both of these, and for people who are Kickstarter backers, they get a 32-page outtakes of photos. So I have these two 32-page booklets of photos that aren't specifically of people, but of their things like the masquerade and cosplay and panels and other things that go on at Comic-Con rather than just trying to get, you know, close-ups of people. But just to take you through, for instance, if there's people you don't know who they are in these covers. So this is Archie Goodwin, writer and editor. This is kind of creme de la creme of underground people, where you have B. Cleveland, Melinda Gebbie, Moscoso, Dan O'Neill. There's Bill Mooney with Heidi McDonald, Sergio, Will Eisner, Matt Groening, before The Simpsons, Ray Bradbury, Al Moore. Apparently, the one year he came, I seem to be the only one who took pictures of him. So this photo of him has been in all kinds of different books and publications over the years. Osama Tezuka, great manga and anime. Jim Lee, when he was like a little kid. These are National Lampoon artists. So you have B.K. Taylor and Sherry Flanagan and Spain Rodriguez. Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Carol Kalish, the woman at Marvel who suggested that the retailers should have cash registers in their stores and, you know, be like real businesses. Great Dave Stevens, Jill Thompson, Barbie Picar, Grant Miller. You've got Trina Robbins, Harvey Kurtzman, Mobius, Art Spiegelman. So that's that era. This I don't have a blow up of, but we have people like Paul Pope and Linda Medley, Danny Clowes, Howard Chaykin, Chris Claremont, George Perez, Al Williamson, Mary Fleener, who couldn't make it tonight because she's got bronchitis, Frank Frazetta, Jeff Smith, Mike Coluda, Billy Tucci, Michael Davis, Marie Severin, Steve Rude, and represents all aspects of comics. That's just a little taste of what's in the books. Anybody else have questions?
So what? When was it determined to transition from the location, the old location, to the Comic-Con, the current Comic-Con convention?
It moved to the convention center in 1991, and that's when the convention center was new. So we were in Hall AB, and we thought, well, it'll be a few years, and then we'll maybe go to C, and then a few more years, and maybe B, and before you know it.
I think we thought it was going to take like 10 years to use the whole convention center.
But the first year we were in there, there was like a quilting show upstairs, and other kinds of events going on. I remember there was a mariachi convention.
The Harley convention.
Harley
too.
convention.
I still Harley convention, if you know.
These cosplay ones, right? So yeah, that expanded a lot faster than we ever thought it was going to.
You should make a special mention of Queens.
I was gonna, one of the things, having done publicity and stuff for the con in the 70s, the transition of the way the press covered the show was interesting, because it seemed like every year, no matter what I tried to do, I'd say, we have this artist alley back here, look at all these artists that are actually doing work, and these are the creators of these characters. So like, how much is that comic book worth? And then the story would be, remember those comics your mom threw away? Well, they're not worth it. It didn't matter what you tried to do to get them to talk about things that were going on in the show. That was all that penetrated their brains. Then, when we moved to the convention center, DC had the first real trade show exhibit type of a booth that any of our exhibitors had done. And it was kind of dubbed Wayne's World because Bob Wayne was the marketing guy at DC who came up with that. Well, Well, suddenly that was a backdrop that the press could stand in front of, and they really couldn't talk about old comics when here's all the new stuff going on. So they started taking different angles and trying to cover it in different ways. Sometimes things they tried to cover were a little pre-planned and it didn't work out. I remember one time Marty Emerald came in. When she was still a reporter, she said, I want to see where the porn is that the kids are being exposed to. It's like, we don't have that. You know, anybody who has adult material, there's, you know, not only city rules, convention center rules, but Comic-Con rules as far as display. They can't be open display, things have to be covered up, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but let me see where the kids are being exposed to the porn. That was the only thing she came that she wanted to do. And she was bound and determined to do it, and she didn't find it, so. The closest would be Olivia's paintings. Little kids can see Olivia's paintings.
Olivia keeps a stockpile of Post-it notes.
Strategically.
There's a few years there that Channel 8 would come in and all they do. I would say at least 3 to 5 years. As soon as they come in, that's what they do. They find a comic with cleavage and they would start showing that on TV.
Comics aren't for kids anymore. Now it's comics are for kids. Look at all the good stuff. Look at that right here.
And of course, the press will then will write what they want to say anyway. When I worked for Jack Dickens at the Comic Kingdom one year, around the time of the convention, they interviewed me, and I got phone calls from people for the ridiculous prices I was quoting for some early books, which weren't prices I quoted at all. They made up their own prices.
Jeez.
And then people said, "Oh, what kind of a ripoff?" It was like, no, we didn't say that. You know, they plugged in numbers they wanted. Yeah.
Dave, by the way, is one of those guys who was in the early planning committee for Comic-Con, who went to Crawford High School.
That's right.
With Scott Shaw.
And John Pound and Greg Bear and Roger Friedman. Yeah, we had a science fiction club meeting in Ken Kruger's bookstore in Ocean Beach.
Speaking of porn.
Yeah, speaking of porn, we were surrounded. Yeah, and Shell Dorff came. Ken Kruger introduced Shell to us, and Shell said, "We've got there's some guys that are up in Claremont Mesa that have like a comics. We're talking about a convention. Why don't you come to this meeting?" And so we all went to that meeting, and that was as far as I know, that was the organizational meeting.
And Will Lund, who's way back over there.
I was still in the Navy at the time.
He was the chair of the con in 1972. So, he was the first chair I met because, you know, I would just go to the con. I didn't know who was putting it on or anything like that. At a certain point, I wanted to write about it because I was a freelance writer. And so I wanted to go to like a planning committee meeting and stuff like that, and that's where I met Shell and Richard Button. Well, actually, I'll tell you how I met Shell Dorff, the founder of Comic-Con. I was married to a guy named Davey Estrada at the time that I went to high school with and everything. And we were at the con in, I think it was 74, and at Del Cortez, and there was a place called the Dawn Room that was the art show. And we were just going to walk past the art show, and this guy kind of stops us, and he says, "Hi, my name's Shell, and are you guys busy right now?" It's like, "Well, what?" "Well, the guy who's in charge of the art show, he's starving, he needs to go eat something, so if you could just watch the art show for like 15 minutes. His name's Clayton Moore, he'll be back, you know." I said, "Okay, we can watch the movie with the art show." Well, earlier in the day, we had met Theodore Sturgeon. And Davey, who's like this tall, curly, dark hair, he was like 25 at the time, got Sturgeon's autograph, but he got it on the back of his badge because it's the only piece of paper he had. So he had this badge that said Ted Sturgeon on it. So Clayton comes back from his lunch and he goes up and he goes, Mr. Sturgeon, I just love your writing." Sorry, I'm not Theodore Sturgeon, but Shell asked us to watch the art show. What are you doing? And then I got invited to go to some planning meetings, and I was just going to write about it, and I ended up being in charge of PR are, and then there's stuff. The rest is history.
So only that, you know, the Comic-Con really had their hands full when it went over to the convention center, because even though Marty Emerald was out looking for it, there was still all these retailers that had like these crazy underground comics and stuff like that, and like Something Weird Video was in vogue, and so they had all kinds of sort of semi-racy stuff that you guys really had to patrol like a lot. In fact, I was at Something Weird booth, and a guy like put a box out and started putting them out and put up a sign that says Tracy Lords, underage, VHS. And I was like, yeah. I went and grabbed Faye and I was like, is that okay? And she's like, Jesus. You know, and had that cleared up in a second, but still it's like people were pushing that envelope. So you had to watch it.
Well, and the great thing is that guys like Rex who just happen to be there at the shows, like notice stuff and they go and say something. You know?
It's important to remember the time that occurred in. It wasn't like happening in a vacuum. The 70s were, you know, as they say, if you can remember it, you weren't there. And, so a lot of crazy stuff was ambient, and fandom was certainly not exempt from
I
it.
credit David Scroggie with doing the effort to get underground comics people to come to Comic-Con. And he went up to, there was something called Berkeley Con, I think, something like that, where he went and he talked a lot of the seminal underground cartoonists. And we were kind of past the underground era by that point, but he still talked them into coming down to San Diego. And so we had them like 76, 77, 78. Then Harvey Kurtzman came to the con in 1979, who was God to all the underground people. And so then we really had a turnout of underground people that year. And they were just doing all kinds of things that I, you know, didn't want to know about. But
an official hotel. What is Hotel San Diego?
well, again, in the early '80s, the Hotel San Diego was. Kate Crab always had a party for the underground folks there.
And they would always rent rooms there during the con.
Yeah.
It's been torn down and it is now a courthouse, which there's some sort of irony there.
Yeah.
Clean up the area.
Was 79 in the community concourse, or was that still the architects?
79 was still the El Cortez. Then it went to community concourse for 80. Then it went back to El Cortez for 1 year, 81, which was when it was owned by the religious
Morris
organization.
Cirillo.
So it was.
And then the rest of the 80s it was.
Was Kurtzman at the 80 con?
He may have come.
I'm trying to remember. At one con at the community concourse, I was just standing around the lobby when suddenly Pete Cleveland was making a beeline out of it, and he just happened to pick me to talk to. He just walks right up to me really fast. He was a fast walker. He goes, I tried to start an argument with Harvey Kurtzman in this panel, but he wouldn't go for it. I don't know what's wrong with these people. And then he just kept walking, and that was my big meeting with Harvey Kurtzman, with Pete Cleveland.
Well, half Cleveland was. One thing I say about him is, no matter how many people came up and asked him questions about the Cleveland Cats, he had a different answer every time. You know, and I mean, you see people at cons, and they pretty much they're known for something, and everybody comes up and asks them about that something, and you hear their same answer over and over again. He was so inventive. He always had something different to say. So he was a fascinating person, and died way too young of a heart ailment.
What about his drawing of the Chinese?
Oh, okay. We used to have a breakfast that fans could sign up and sit with the guests. So, you know, we'd have guests at tables 1 through 12, and you could sign up for, you know, I want to sit at so-and-so's table. So people would sign up to sit at Cleveland's table for breakfast. So I was at his table, and there was a girl who came in. She had her sketchbook, and she said, could you draw me something for my sister? And he said, sure. And he went to go draw a cat. She said, but it has to be a Siamese cat because my sister loves Siamese cats. And he goes, I don't draw Siamese cats. I draw stripy cats. So I draw. Please, oh please, oh please, could I have a Siamese cat? She loves Siamese cats. So you see him drawing. Gives it to her. It's 2 stripy cats joined together. That was his sense of humor. Yeah, that's, you know, we can never appreciate how much these wonderful things are going on while you're there. It's like years later you go, wow, how did I manage to be in that situation and be with those people and interact with them? And to talk to Joe Shuster or Jerry Siegel or Carl Barks. I met Carl Barks, I went to his place and took pictures at his house because of Comic-Con. Any other questions?
Just, did you have a sense of like how important these photos were going to be?
Sometimes when I would get somebody that was aware, you know, I didn't think I'd ever see Charles Schultz again when I took pictures of him in 1974. You know, because that was a special deal that Shell was able to talk him into coming to the show. So that, and anytime I saw Ray Bradbury, I thought that was special. Sometimes it was just, I went through these pictures, these negatives, and I'm going, who is that? I don't even remember taking that picture, and I would post it on Facebook, and people tell me he wasn't. I didn't even know he was at the convention. I got a picture of him. You know, like, so, I'm old. My memory's good. But what we're gonna do is, anybody who's, you know, wants to buy books, I'll sign them. Everything's purchased at the cash register. Everybody here who's got pictures in the book, be happy to sign books for you. Kevin Eastman's going to be here at 7:30, 8:30 to do signings. And also, you know, our other guests here have their stuff for sale. And like I say, if you want 2 books, you get the dust jacket. And if you brought your own book with you that you already purchased, you know, you get those signed too. So, thank you so much.
All right.